Hi, this is James with Rocketry Works. Today we're going to go through the build for the Socrates model rocket kit. Socrates is a low-power rocket that's great for school groups or scout groups. It flies on 1/2 A through C powered motors, so it can fly on small fields if it needs to, but it can get some great altitude if you have more flying field. The build takes about an hour to complete with second grade classrooms with fairly little help, but some parent help is certainly a great thing if you can get it. But you can step through these video instructions and follow along with the class. All right, apart from what comes in your Socrates kit bag, the only tools or equipment you'll need are some paper towels, always a good idea, and some wood glue. We keep it simple, no sandpaper required, no hobby knives. This is intended for elementary school age kids, so we try to keep it as simple as possible. So let's take a look at what's in the bag. All right, we've opened up our bag and laid the parts out so that we can make sure we have everything we need. Now, before you throw the bag away, keep in mind that it's really useful to use as a drop cloth in your classroom or anywhere you're working, just to keep your table clean. Kids are maybe going to spill glue on the table, and if they're working over the drop cloth at all times, then the mess is going to be contained and it's super easy to clean up. So it works for any school group or scout group. Inside the bag, you'll also have a QR code and a URL for a link to the product page for the Socrates model rocket kit, and that's going to link to this video to give you instructions for how to do this build. Now, the kit parts itself includes the airframe tube, which includes a slotted end where the fins are going to fit, 4 laser cut balsa fins. Going to have a launch lug. This is the guide that keeps your rocket going in the right direction until the rocket is going fast enough for the fins to guide it. And you have some 3D printed parts for the motor assembly, which includes the motor tube, the forward centering ring, and this also serves as the motor block, and the aft centering ring, which also has a screw-on motor retainer, which you're going to be able to use to secure your motor inside the motor tube when you're preparing for flight. You can either keep this on or keep it off during the build. I've seen both ways work. Just as we're working, we're going to try to avoid getting glue in those threads. We also have this yellow Kevlar shock cord, which is going to secure to the front end of the motor assembly, thread through the rocket, and tie on to the nose cone, and keep all your parts together during flight. We also have 2 stickers, and one of those stickers is going to be used for securing your streamer, which is your recovery device that will allow this rocket to recover safely to fly over and over again. Okay, we'll start our build out right now with the motor mount parts. This includes the shock cord, that's the Kevlar string that will hold our rocket parts together. The forward centering ring, that's the one with the slot in the end, and that's going to be where the shock cord fits. Our motor tube, and our aft centering ring, which also has the motor retainer cap that screws onto it. We will need our glue and also some paper towels, and we're working on our drop cloth here, which is our plastic bag that the kit arrived in. So the first thing we want to do, though, is uncoil your shock cord. We're going to want to tie some knots first. And the knots we're going to tie are going to be the same knot we use to tie our shoes, or to start to tie our shoes. It's a single overhand knot. You can take this shock cord and thread it through the large hole in your forward centering ring and let it kind of come right up into that slot so that it fits through that slot. And you want to stay quite close to the edge of the string. So you have one really short end and one really long end. And you can cross those over and take that short end and loop it through the middle. So that what you're left with is called a single overhand knot, right close to the end with just a little bit of tail here. Not a lot, because you want this string nice and long to go do its thing through the rest of the rocket. And you can tighten that down tight as long as you leave enough tail to do that again. So right now I've only got about 1 inch. That's as short as I would want to go, because we want to repeat that process, which basically just means make a loop, cross the short end over the long end, and take that short end and twist it through the middle. So So you wind up with 2 of those single overhand knots that we use to start to tie our shoes. And this is like what happens when you screw up tying your shoes. You wind up with a granny knot, which is a knot that will not come untied. And you can pull it so that the knot portion is right on top there. And it just sort of sits there, and you should be able to hang your forward centering ring off of that string. Once we've got that secured, basically that's going to be its anchor point, and it's going to be the way that we make sure that we keep our shock cord tied together through all the parts of the rocket so that all the parts stay together when we are flying. The next step we want to do, we want to start using our wood glue. Now you can use a white school glue if you want, but I recommend wood glue because it tends to fit better than, it tends to cure better than white glue. And what you want to do here is take either end of the motor tube and put a bead of glue around that end. By a bead of glue, I mean a fairly steady line. In this case, I kind of laid a glob down, so I just kind of used the tip of the glue to smear it all the way around there. It doesn't need to be perfect, but you know, having a good amount on there is kind of what we're looking for. And then take your forward centering ring that we just tied the string around and slide it on there while we're twisting. And the reason you want to twist is that helps distribute that glue inside into the grooves in that plastic. Because wood glue won't stick to plastic well, but it will stick well enough, especially when it gets into the 3D printed grooves. And what you also want to do is go ahead and leave little bits of glue inside these holes that form a ring around the forward centering ring. And the reason for this is that that's really going to be the anchor that holds this centering ring onto the wood, the cardboard. So this wood glue is going to stick very well to the cardboard, and it's going to form this little plug that sits out through the centering ring. And what we want to do, if you've got a lot of extra there, that's okay. You can just kind of smear it off, smear it around in there. It's okay if you get extra glue on the outside of this centering ring. But as long as that centering ring is secured to the tube, it's going to do what we need it to in the rocket. I have a little extra here on my finger, so I'll be sure to wipe that off onto paper towels. And again, I'm working over the drop cloth so that I don't make a big mess. Now, of course, there's 2 ways you can go about applying glue to this surface. One is that you could put the glue inside here, and I don't recommend that. And the reason is, if you put that in there, inside the centering ring, and then put the tube in there, it's going to take that glue and kind of scrape it up, and it will get into the end of the motor retainer in a way that could gum up the hole there that the motor fits into, and it might not work. So better, just like in the forward centering ring, for the aft centering ring, is to run a bead of glue around the aft end of the motor tube. And here I got a little thick in some places, so I just kind of used the tip of the glue bottle to spread it around so it's more evenly distributed. And just like before, I'm going to twist while I insert this, and that's going to allow that any excess glue is going to get pushed up in front. And I can use my finger, which is a perfect tool for spreading glue. Use my finger just to kind of smear that in so there's not a huge excess there. And then any of that extra can just get tucked up into any number of those holes there. But again, you want to make sure to fill those holes with glue so that you're basically creating a physical anchor for this plastic on the wood. Because the glue may not stick to the plastic, but it will stick to itself, and it will stick to the cardboard very well. And so what you're left with are 6 little pegs of glue that wind up drying in there to form an anchor for that motor mount. So with this, the motor mount itself is now complete. We have our shock cord tied onto the front, we have our forward centering ring tied to the shock cord, and we have our aft centering ring with the motor retainer on there. Now you notice I did get some glue right here on the very edge of the back part of the motor retainer, but I didn't get any in the threads. If you do, that's okay. It can be cleaned up easy enough with some paper towels, as long as you catch it before it cures. So right now, again, I'll clean my hands up. And we can pretty much move right away on to the next step, which is anchoring this in place inside our motor tube. And that's next. Okay, now that we've completed our motor mount assembly, we're going to insert the motor mount into the airframe tube. And this airframe tube, just like the motor mount, has a forward and an aft end. The forward end has just a regular straight side. The aft end has these 4 fin slots around it. And that's where our motor mount is going to go. So the first thing you need to do is take the loose end of your shock cord, straighten it out a little bit if you need to. And you want to slide it into the end of the airframe tube that has these fin slots. Now be careful not to stick them out one of the fin slots. That's not what we want to do. We want to stick them past the fin slots so that that string goes all the way down the tube and comes out, and eventually it will come out the other end. The string is a little bit stiff, so it's actually not difficult in all cases to push it up the end, and you may be able to grab that right out from the other end and pull it all the way through. So at this point what you have is your airframe tube with your motor mount all suspended on this string. And what we're going to do is we're simply going to insert this motor mount inside the airframe tube. And you may look at this and wonder, wait a minute, aren't you going to glue this in? And the answer is yes, we will. But as long as we have anchored our centering rings nicely with those plugs of glue in the holes, those are not going to come off. So we don't need to get things really messy by using a lot of extra glue that will wind up dripping out of those fin slots. So what we want to do now is, with that resting in there, grab our 4 fins and our wood glue, and we're going to glue fins in here one at a time. A lot of times it's a good idea to just test fit things to get an idea for how they fit. And sometimes it's a little awkward to fit these in, so it helps to wiggle back and forth a little bit, or this way and that way. And if you test fit these without glue, you're going to get an idea for how these should be fitting before you've got glue mixed all over everything. So you see that these fins do fit in there nicely. They want to come out a little bit because there's no glue in there, but they fit in pretty well. And by test fitting it, you get an idea for how the best way is to get that to fit in there. So when you're ready to put them in, you've become familiar with that, go ahead and take your glue bottle and lay a bead of glue along the entire root edge of the fin. That means this entire section that has the fin tabs sticking up on it. And you see there I just made a little glob that was a little bit much, and that's okay. That would be a little bit messy, but you can often just use the tip of the glue bottle to kind of put that back where it belonged. Now the right amount of glue is just about what I have here. You see that it's covering the full surface, but it's not dripping off too very badly. And then you can basically take that up, and you see what we're going to do now is insert that fin tab into the slot. It will be a little bit more tricky since you have glue messing things up now, but it generally goes really smoothly. And when you've got that there, you'll notice that there's some glue globs on either side of that fin. Again, a finger is an excellent tool to use to just smooth that out. And this is what's called making a fillet. And that fillet actually adds glue. It gets rid of the drippy glue and prevents the glue from being so messy. But it also adds a little bit more surface area to the glue, which makes it stronger. So in the end, what you're left with is a not very messy setup that doesn't have a lot of extra glue. And what you want to do, what I recommend doing now, is always work with your rocket upright like this. Because if you lay it on its side, either gravity will pull this fin off center, so it's bent out to the side like that, or if you have more fins on there, you lay it down and they're all going to get squished. So what you want is these fins sticking straight out from the edge of the tube. So you don't want it off at an angle like that. That's not very strong. The reason this is strong is that your fin is connected to this airframe in 2 places. One place is right here on the surface of the airframe tube. The other is down inside, right on the motor tube. And so by making sure this is sticking straight up and down, you're making sure that you're able to glue that in the 2 places. And once you've got that in place, just kind of stand it up right here to start to dry, and that's going to be the best shot of keeping your fins on straight. Once you've done that, you can start moving on to the other fins and just basically repeat 4 times. Okay, at this point in our project, we have assembled our motor mount, and we have inserted the motor mount into the tube, and we've secured the motor mount inside our airframe tube using the root edge of the fins and a full coating of glue there. Right now, the glue on the fins is still a little bit wet, so we can make some adjustments if we need to, and now's the time to do that. So take a look at your airframe tube and see if your fins are sticking straight out from the tube, making a plus sign. If any of your fins are bent off at an angle like that, that's not going to be a super strong bond, so we want to make sure that they are straightened up, straight up and down, coming straight out from the tube. That's going to make sure that you have contact inside on the motor tube, where you can't see it, and also here on the airframe tube. And those 2 connection points are what make this a stronger bond. The other thing you want to check right now is make sure you don't have a lot of extra glue dripping down the outside of your tube. And the reason you want to make sure that doesn't happen is if glue gets inside these threads, you may have a hard time on launch day clearing that glue out before we screw our retainer cap on there. So take a moment now, maybe with your paper towel, and clean up any excess glue that may be dripping alongside here. Fingers are always a great tool for moving glue. You smear that into the fillet between the fin and the airframe tube, and that's the best way to make good use of your glue and to make sure you don't have too much. If it's dripping down the tube, go ahead and take the time now to remove it before it makes a mess and then dries up and you have a hard time removing it. Okay, with our fins drying, we can kind of set the airframe aside for a minute. Leave it on your plastic though, so that you don't make a mess on your surface. And we're going to do the last bit of gluing we have, and that is starting with our launch lug. This launch lug is going to be what guides our rocket until it's going fast enough for the fins to guide it through the air. What it's going to do is it's going to fit right here on this little etched rectangle. And that's going to allow you to line it up just right. Because of the curved surface, it's going to sit right on the tube straight, and it's going to be lined up here between fins. So what we're going to do is we're going to load up the foot of this launch lug with just enough glue to cover the base. And you see there are holes in this plastic foot. And the idea here is, just like with our other plastic parts, we're using wood glue to fill plugs into those holes. So I use just enough glue to cover the full surface, and already I have glue inside those holes. Then I'm going to take my launch lug and place it right inside that rectangle. And as I do that, what you see happen is the glue from the foot kind of bubbles up through the holes and forms plugs that are going to hold that in place. So with these plugs sticking through here, we know that glue is going to hold that plastic onto the side of the tube. And again, once that's done, I encourage you to return the whole thing to the upright position, but do keep an eye on this launch lug. If you used a lot of glue, it may want to slide down the outside of the tube. So just keep an eye on that. It's okay if it slides a little bit, but if it slides too much, it may go crooked or it may drop off all the way. So just keep an eye on that, make sure it stays about where you left it. At this point, we can cap our glue because we're done gluing this rocket. Okay, at this point, we're done gluing our rocket. We have the rocket with the glued parts sitting off to the side of our plastic sheet so it doesn't drip on the table surface, and we're letting it dry. In the meantime, we're going to go ahead and connect our shock cord to our nose cone and then attach the streamer, which is our recovery device that will allow us to recover this rocket safely and fly it again and again. So much like the time we tied the shock cord to the forward centering ring, we're going to do the same thing with the nose cone. You'll see two holes in the shoulder of the nose cone. You can use either hole. You don't need to use both. I think it's easier to use just one. All you need to do is stick the end of the shock cord, the loose end, through that hole, and just like you did before, we have a very short end and we have a long end that's connected to the rest of the rocket. Take those two ends and cross the short end over the long end and make a single overhand knot. This is what it looks like when it's loose. Tighten it up a little bit, it's a little less easy to see. Once you've done one of those, they're easy to come out. So go ahead and do another one. Again, make a loop, cross the lines over and pass the short end through the middle. And all of a sudden you have a granny knot that will not come out. You should have just a little bit of extra string on the end. I like to tuck that up into the nose cone, just makes it a little easier to deal with. As long as your knot is not out here on the outside of the shoulder, that knot should be kind of wrapped around on the inside like this so that it's out of the way. With that, you can lay this shock cord down on the table like that and take your streamer. So the streamer is going to create drag when it is flopping out in the breeze after your rocket ejects the nose cone, and it's going to allow us to recover the rocket safely. What we want to do is we want to secure the streamer to the shock cord, and for that you can use one of these included Rocketry Works stickers. Simply peel the back off it and position it underneath the streamer right off the end like this, so that the sticky end is still hanging out there. You can then position the shock cord right across the base of the streamer and fold that sticker down so that the whole sticky part is stuck to the streamer on both sides. That way it's not going to stick to anything, and it is securing your shock cord to the streamer so that all three parts, the nose cone, the streamer, and the rocket body, all stay together when you recover. And with that, that's your entire build. All right, congratulations, you've finished the build. At this point, you have your rocket complete. Your fins should have glue drying well. They're probably in pretty good shape right now, but don't bend them, just let them dry. Your launch lug should be secured on the side of your tube. Again, it's probably a little damp, so you can move it around if you try, so try to leave it alone unless it's moved a lot, then try to reposition it into that rectangle a little better. At this point, I do not recommend tucking these parts inside the tube. It's really tempted to do that to have a completed rocket, but I don't encourage you to do that, and this is why. It's possible that there's some glue inside that tube, and if there is glue in the tube and you stick your streamer in there, it could get stuck in there, and then you're going to have a problem on launch day. So at this point, it's best to just leave them out. Just like when you were drawing your fins earlier, leave the rocket sitting down upright on the table and leave your nose cone and streamer sitting on the table next to it. If you are ready to go and put this up on a counter or a shelf somewhere to dry, now's a great time to do that. Just again, as you set it there, make sure that all the wet glue parts are on some plastic or on a surface that won't get damaged, and that they're all in the right position, and that you don't have a lot of extra drips. With that, you should just be able to give this an hour or two to dry. Your glue should be dry enough to go fly. Ideally, you give it overnight, and then you know that your glue will be in good shape for a flight day. Don't forget. All right, now that your rocket is complete and completely dried, we're going to go through the steps to prepare for flight. All right, so far we haven't inserted our streamer or our nose cone on there, but we do have our motor retainer cap on the back of our rocket. At this point, it's perfectly safe to lay your rocket down on its fins here because they've dried out completely. First thing we want to do in preparing our rocket for flight is to load recovery wadding. So recovery wadding is flame-proof tissue that's been treated chemically so that it won't burn. And this protects the plastic streamer from the hot ejection gases that will come out of the front end of the motor when it ejects the nose cone at the end of flight. So what you want to do when we're loading this is you want to make sure don't crumple this up in a big ball. Keep your recovery wadding very loose, and you want to take one square at a time and just insert it so that it fills the whole part of the tube. And you're going to want to use probably 3 sheets of recovery wadding. Should be sufficient. And again, I don't even like to keep it folded in half like that. I like it to be occupying as much space as you can, but you want to keep it really loose in there. If you need to jam that in like with a pencil, you're doing it too hard, and you're going to risk not ejecting that nose cone when it comes to the end of the flight. So with your recovery wadding in there, now we can put our streamer inside the rocket. And it's one thing you could roll this whole thing up, but that's kind of long and cumbersome. So I like to fold this streamer in half, and in half again, and one more time. So you wind up with a fairly short streamer to start with. Then you can start rolling it up from one end so that it rolls up smaller than your airframe tube. You can just slide that streamer into the end. Again, gently is the key here. It should slide in and out nice and easily. Then you can take your extra shot cord and just tuck it down into that airframe tube. Do not leave your streamer sitting in here in the nose cone, because then it won't be able to do its job of slowing the rocket down on its way down. But once you've got that tucked away, make sure that the knot on the nose cone shoulder is on the inside of the nose cone, and slide your nose cone on. And that way your rocket is prepped, ready for propulsion. And so that's where we work on the other end. You've got your motor retainer cap unscrewed, and you have your motor tube ready to take your motor. In this case, we're using a B64 motor. There's a nozzle end on the motor and a forward end on the motor. The motors you can use on this rocket include a 1/2 A62, an A83, a B44 or a B64, and a C65. Those are the recommended motors. And remember, each letter of the alphabet we go up is going to double the power. So if you have a really small flying field, like the size of a small schoolyard, or maybe something smaller than a baseball field, I'm going to recommend the 1/2 A62 motor. If you have a soccer field to fly on, you could fly on an A83. If you've got 2 soccer fields, or like a soccer field and a bunch of extra area, I'd fly on a B64. And if you have a really big area, you can fly it on a C65, but you're going to need a very big field that usually is bigger than most school fields, just because it's going to go very high. It's going to go about 800 feet, and it's going to recover quite a ways away. So you want to make sure that you fly the field that is appropriate to your motor. All right, so make sure you have a nozzle end sticking out the aft end, and put the other end in to the motor tube. It should slide all the way in until it's sticking out about a quarter of an inch. At that point, you can put your motor retainer cap on and twist it down until it is snug. It doesn't have to be super tight, but put it on until it feels about right. This way, this one's screwed on all the way, and that means the motor is fully secured in there. Your model rocket igniter is going to look something like this. Sometimes the tip of the propellant is a different color, but they typically have these little paper tabs on them. Insert that into the nozzle and kind of hold it off to the side so that you can take your plug, and these plugs are color-coded to the right motor, and you push that plug into the end of the